But you probably heard that I've been dealing with a few health challenges this fall, and my doctors told me to take it easy for just a little while.
In the eyes of the public, Dolly Parton has always appeared almost unreal. Towering blonde hair, glittering dresses, and a smile so wide it seemed untouched by pain. For decades, people have grown used to seeing her on stage with that radiant voice, her sharp humor, and a presence that refused to age even as nearly 80 years passed. Yet behind all that sparkle is a woman who lost the only partner she ever had, who paid for her fame with her youth, her time, and her private relationships. Someone who, now at 79, has begun telling her story entirely on her own terms, without softening, embellishing, or avoiding anything. In today's story, Dolly doesn't just talk about the spotlight. She opens up about what she sacrificed and what she's still trying to hold on to. She recalls being a little girl singing to a coop full of chickens and younger siblings. The moment she first understood the magnetism of a star while watching Johnny Cash on stage, the years of gratitude and conflict beside Porter Wagoner, and the firm decision to never let anyone, not even the music industry, confine her to a single image. Threaded through all these memories is the silhouette of her husband, Carl Dean, the great love of 60 years, whom she has just had to say goodbye to, now brought onto her stage in a musical about her own life, as if to make sure he never disappears. This is no longer the story of Dolly Parton, the country music legend, but of a small, stubborn woman who worked herself to exhaustion, stayed fiercely loyal to who she was, and only now, standing on the edge of 80, dares to ask, what did all of it ultimately bring? To her, to the man who stood quietly outside the spotlight, and to the audience who still believe that if they work hard enough and refuse to abandon themselves, they too might live a life as full as hers. Dolly Parton was born in Locust Ridge, a remote mountain corner of Tennessee where poverty wasn't a story, but the air people breathed. She often joked that her family was so poor we didn't even know there was a poorer. But behind that humor were winters without electricity, without hot water, and nights when 12 children slept pressed together under a patched roof, believing love alone could keep them warm. That small wooden cabin had nothing but wind and the sound of children. Yet it was there that Dolly's voice began to take shape, first singing to the chickens, then to her younger siblings, then to anyone who happened to pass by the front porch. Sometimes she stood before an old tin can, pretending it was a microphone. Her tiny hands wrapped around the guitar, her Uncle Bill Owens, who grew up like the other half of her heart, had taught her to strum. Bill was the first to recognize the spark rising in his little niece. He drove her to sing at churches, fairs, and local gatherings, patiently planting in her mind the idea that if you want it, you can be a real star. And Dolly wanted it. Wanted it enough never to back down. At 10, while most children in Locust Ridge only knew cornfields and pine hills, Dolly appeared on television on the Cass Walker Show. A skinny girl with messy blonde hair stood under bright lights, shaking like a leaf, but the trembling vanished the moment she sang. The audience applauded. Dolly looked at Bill as if asking, "They really like me?" And Bill nodded. Just a simple nod, but one that redirected the entire course of her life. Soon after, the Grand Ole Opry, the holy ground of country music, opened a door no one thought a mountain child could walk through. Dolly was terrified and thrilled, unsure of what waited beyond the curtain, until she saw Johnny Cash. For a teenage girl, that was the first moment she understood the power of a star, an energy that made her whole body tremble, that made it impossible to look away. Johnny was the one who introduced her on stage that night, and she still remembers the feeling of being seen for the first time. A vast auditorium, a long wave of applause, and a sudden thought as she stepped off stage. Maybe I really can become a star? No one in the Tennessee hills knew they had just witnessed the beginning of a legend. But Dolly knew. That voice, that hunger, and those nights in a powerless cabin forged a resolve she would later describe simply, "I will succeed, no matter what it costs." The years ahead would bring trials, rejection, tears, and quiet battles. But the poverty of Appalachia built a Dolly Parton who never learned to bow her head. Because when you're born with nothing, the only thing you have left to wager is yourself. When Dolly Parton left home for Nashville, no one took her by the hand, no contract sat in her pocket, and no promise awaited her from the music industry. All she had was an 18-year-old body with a voice bright as morning sunlight and a stubborn, innocent belief. If I can't make it here, where on earth could I possibly make it? Nashville at the time was a maze of barriers for young women, especially for someone from Appalachia, with hair that wasn't sleek, clothes that weren't fashionable, and eyes too honest to be branded. But Dolly was different. She never walked into a room with the timidness of someone asking for permission. She walked in as herself, as a woman who knew exactly what she was born to do. And that was what made the doors begin to open. In 1967, Dolly appeared on The Porter Wagoner Show, a fateful turning point. Porter Wagoner, one of country music's most powerful figures then, saw in this young woman not just a soaring voice, but a steel spirit wrapped in a gentle exterior. Yet if he thought she would obediently follow his lead, he was wrong. Dolly Parton was never the kind of woman who let any man decide her path. The early years with Porter were an unofficial battlefield. He tried to run the show his way. Dolly fought to keep her identity. One side represented tradition, the other, ambition. One was the old stage, the other the open door to a larger world. Dolly once said, "I grew up with my daddy and 6 brothers. No man can bully me." And true to her word, when Nashville demanded she stay safely tucked inside Porter's shadow, she chose a different direction. She stood up and walked away. That decision led to one of the most turbulent periods of her life. Porter was furious, fans were confused, and record labels were anxious. But amid the storm of their split, Dolly did something no one expected. She wrote, "I Will Always Love You," a song not meant for a lover, but for the man who helped her step onto the stage, written with gratitude, dignity, and the freedom she believed she deserved. During this same period, Dolly began leaving her mark as a multifaceted artist, writing music, producing, experimenting with pop, acting, and crafting her own image, a look many dismissed as too flashy, too gaudy, yet it was exactly what transformed her into a cultural icon. She refused to be boxed in, refused to be just the sweet country girl, refused to stand behind anyone. That is why in Nashville, Dolly became the story every female artist afterward knew by heart. To survive, you must dare to write your own story. Dolly Parton stepped out of Porter's shadow, stepped into a brighter spotlight, and never looked back. But the most remarkable part wasn't the courage it took to leave. It was the grace with which she did it. Because even when she was pulled back, criticized, or misunderstood, Dolly chose to write a song overflowing with love. And it was that kindness, not fame, that allowed her career to withstand more than half a century. Dolly's early years weren't just the runway for a legend. They were proof that the brightest light doesn't come from the stage, but from a heart that refuses to break. When Dolly Parton walked away from the Porter Wagoner Show, many believed her career would stall. A tiny girl from Appalachia, distancing herself from one of the most powerful men in country music. They thought it was stepping out of the safe zone and slamming the door behind her. But Dolly didn't just step out. She blew open every other door in sight. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Dolly Parton rose in a way no one could have predicted. Her bold transformation forced Nashville to step back, while Hollywood and the rest of America moved forward to embrace her with a mix of surprise and admiration. Dolly didn't just sing. She redefined the idea of what a star could be. She didn't just shine. She built the very light she stood in with her own hands. Jolene and I Will Always Love You, 2 hits on the same album, turned her into a phenomenon. One was a confession of a woman's deepest insecurity. The other, one of the most beautiful goodbyes ever written. No one else could capture both emotions in the same breath. Only Dolly, as Here You Come Again, 9 to 5, Coat of Many Colors, and Islands in the Stream climbed the charts far beyond country music's borders. Dolly proved she didn't belong in any box the world tried to lock her in. She was deep enough for country songwriting, witty enough for sitcoms, charming enough to dominate talk shows, and sharp enough to survive in an industry run by men. And then Hollywood called. 9 to 5 wasn't just Dolly's film debut. It was a manifesto for working women, tired of being belittled, controlled, and judged by their looks. Dolly stepped onto the screen without shedding 1 ounce of who she was. The towering blonde hair, the ringing laugh, the legendary figure she herself joked about before anyone else could. She redefined soft power, the way a woman faces the world with humor, intelligence, and unshakable self-worth. When Dollywood opened in 1986, Dolly became one of the few artists to turn fan love into a physical space, a place where families, children, and everyday workers could find joy. The park wasn't a display of wealth. It was a reminder that a poor girl from a house without electricity could build a kingdom for others, a place where every child had the right to dream as big as she once did. At her peak, Dolly Parton was no longer just a country music star, no longer just an entertainer, no longer just an actress, entrepreneur, or philanthropist. She became a cultural symbol, a woman who dared to do what no one else would, who dared to stand alone, who dared to follow the voice inside rather than the noise of the world outside. Her career entered its brightest era, not because she tried to please the audience, but because she stayed absolutely loyal to herself. As she once said, "If you ever see me running after someone, I'm probably running to catch an ice cream truck." Dolly didn't chase trends. She created them. She didn't seek status. She held it. She didn't try to be loved. She simply stayed herself, and love found its way to her. At the height of her fame, Dolly Parton didn't need to change to become a legend. She simply had to stay steady while everything else shifted around her. Dolly Parton has never flaunted her private world. While Hollywood spent decades sifting through every scrap of celebrity gossip, Dolly chose to smile, step aside, and seal her family life like a fortress. She gave the world everything: music, laughter, compassion, an immortal image. But she never allowed anyone to peer into her heart. Only in recent years, when age softened every layer of armor, did she begin speaking about love, pain, and loss, as if she had finally reached a stage of life where she needed to be held by someone else. The greatest love of Dolly Parton's life began in the last place anyone would expect: the parking lot of a laundromat. No spotlight, no applause, just Dolly, the 18-year-old girl who had just left home and still smelled faintly of laundry soap, and Carl Dean, the young man who saw something in her that the rest of the world would only recognize much later. Carl didn't know Dolly Parton, the American legend, nor did he care for fame or glamour. He simply saw a girl so radiant she made Nashville pause, for a tiny fraction of a second. That moment sent Dolly's life down a path she had no idea would become a 6-decade love story. Carl Dean never belonged to Hollywood, and he never tried to. He lived like a quiet moon, distant but gentle, allowing Dolly, the blazing sun, to shine without ever being overshadowed. They were opposites in every way. Dolly talked endlessly, Carl spoke little. Dolly lived under the lights, Carl lived outside them. Dolly befriended audiences, Carl befriended silence. But it was precisely those differences that anchored them. Dolly loved his steadiness, the quiet safety he gave her, the kind of peace a performer's life could never offer. And Carl, as she once said, was the only person who saw me before the whole world saw me. There was one night that defined their entire marriage, the only time Carl ever tried stepping into Dolly's world. She brought him to the BMI Awards, when she won Song of the Year. Dolly proudly held the arm of her newlywed husband, while Carl, wearing a tuxedo for the first time, sat there like a man trapped inside a glass box. When the camera flashes started, he froze. And the moment the event ended, as soon as they reached the parking lot, he stripped off his tie, then his bow tie, then his jacket, like someone escaping the thick air of a room not meant for him. Finally, he looked at Dolly and said something calm yet absolute. "I want you to succeed, but I will never go to these things again. Don't ever ask me to." Dolly never asked again. She understood, and Carl kept his word. For 60 years, Hollywood has always favored noise and spectacle, and Carl's silence fueled decades of speculation. At one point, the press even questioned whether Dolly had a husband at all. Some journalists outright claimed Carl Dean is a fictional character. Worse still, there were rumors that Dolly and Judy Ogle, her childhood best friend, were the real couple. Those whispers reached Dolly, reached Carl, but he only laughed and said, "As long as they're not hurting you, I don't care." That was Carl's way of protecting Dolly. No explanations, no anger, just quietly standing between her and a world full of noise. Carl's silence was never a barrier. It was an invisible embrace that allowed Dolly to move freely through fame without losing herself. She once said that because of Carl, she was never pressured to become a traditional wife or forced to shrink her ambitions. He stayed home, tended the farm, read the paper, worked alone, lived a life that had nothing to do with Hollywood. Yet he was always the place Dolly returned to, the old wooden chair in the small kitchen where she could finally breathe like a normal human being. Anyone who loves Dolly knows she rarely cries in public, but whenever she speaks about Carl, her voice drops a few notes, like a guitar string plucked exactly on its thinnest point. Carl didn't attend shows, didn't go to award ceremonies, never gave interviews, never walked a red carpet. Yet he was present in every beat of Dolly's life. In every song she wrote, every decision she made, every detour she took to protect a marriage too precious to let Hollywood touch. When Carl Dean passed away, Dolly didn't cry on camera, but she said one sentence that told the world everything. "It was the greatest loss of my life." No fanfare, no tearful statement, no eulogy. Carl's passing was as quiet as the way he lived, gentle, warm, and absolutely private. And yet Dolly, who has always believed music is a form of resurrection, brought Carl back to life every night on stage. In the Broadway musical about her life, the character playing Carl Dean walks out and says, "Hello, I'm Carl Dean," and the entire theater erupts. A man who spent his whole life avoiding the spotlight was now receiving thunderous applause. Dolly sits in the audience, watching him appear in another body, but still carrying that same softness. And she says that in those moments, she feels as though he never left. 60 years of love, somehow, is still continuing. Carl Dean left behind no famous quotes, no interviews, no glamorous stories. But he left something far more valuable. He allowed Dolly to be Dolly, not the version Hollywood wanted, not a casualty of men's ambition, not a woman punished by fame. He allowed her to live, create, and shine fully, while always having a safe place to return to. And that is why, when Carl Dean left this world, Dolly didn't just lose a husband. She lost the only person who had ever seen the 18-year-old girl standing in that laundromat parking lot before the world turned her into a legend. If Carl Dean was the place Dolly belonged, then Judy Ogle was the one who walked beside her on every road. They did not love each other in the way tabloids once tried to force into a narrative. They were bound in a way deeper, steadier, and harder to define than any relationship Hollywood had ever seen. A friendship that began in 3rd grade, stretched through adolescence, survived war, poverty, the days when Dolly still ran barefoot in Locust Ridge, and later, the brightest and darkest years of show business. Judy wasn't just a friend. She was the only person who knew every version of Dolly, the little girl singing to chickens, the teenager blushing at the sight of Johnny Cash, the woman who had to stitch herself together after each wound fame carved into her. Judy entered Dolly's life not because of glamour. When they met, there was none. What she saw was just a small girl with messy hair and eyes so bright they seemed ready to burst through every limit of Appalachia. True friends often share the smallest things, and between Dolly and Judy, those small things became the very thread that kept them close. The old guitar, the cramped high school bed, afternoons dreaming about life beyond the mountains. The backstage moments when Judy quietly wiped sweat from Dolly's face, and the nights they held hands and prayed before stepping into the unknown. When Dolly left Tennessee to chase music, Judy couldn't go with her. Judy's family was too poor, and she had to choose the military for health insurance and a chance at a better life. Dolly promised, "When you come back, I'll be here to pick you up." That promise became the anchor of their lives. And just as Dolly predicted, when Judy left the military, Dolly had already begun taking her first steps in Nashville. Judy arrived, Dolly opened the door, and the two of them continued the unfinished road they had dreamed of since the 3rd grade. From then on, Judy became irreplaceable in Dolly's world. She wasn't an assistant in the professional sense. She was the keeper of secrets, a landmark in every chapter of Dolly's life, the person sitting backstage while the world watched the spotlight. Judy was the second pair of eyes, the second memory, and sometimes even the second heart. The one who quietly knew when Dolly shook, when Dolly was sad, when Dolly was tired, when Dolly needed a hand to hold. But Judy's presence also carried the price of misunderstanding. When the public couldn't fathom that a celebrity could have a lifelong friend without flaunting it, rumors sprouted. People said they were secret lovers. Some claimed Carl was just a cover. Others spun cheap stories about a love triangle that never existed. Dolly often laughed, but Judy was hurt. Dolly said, "Judy is my family, not in the way they think, but in the way only people who have a true soulmate friend can understand." Their friendship was too deep, too pure to be labeled just friends, yet far too clean to be mistaken for anything else. Judy was the person Dolly trusted, not because she always agreed, but because she was the one who dared to say no, dared to warn, dared to pull Dolly back when she flew too fast, dared to stand beside her when she broke. No spotlight needed, no title needed, no recognition needed. When Dolly created the musical about her life, One of the hardest sections for her to write was the part about Judy. Because Judy wasn't just a friend. She was the witness to every version of Dolly that ever existed. Judy had seen Dolly fail, seen her hollowed out, seen her argue with Porter Wagoner, seen her break under family losses, seen her bruised by show business. And Judy had also seen Dolly love, forgive, rise, win, and become an icon to millions. And when Carl Dean, the man Dolly loved most, passed away, it was Judy who pulled her back from the emptiness. Not with advice, not with philosophy, simply with presence. The same thing Judy had given her since the 3rd grade. A life as long and heavy as Dolly Parton's could only stretch this far because she had 2 pillars behind her. Carl, the place to return to, and Judy, the companion on the road. One was love and one was friendship. One was silence and one was understanding. One held Dolly's heart, the other held her soul. Dolly has often said, there are many ways to love someone, and not every kind of love needs Hollywood's definition. With Judy Ogle, it was the love of 2 souls who grew up together, who saw each other clearly through every beat of life, and held hands through things that fame could never heal. Not every deepest relationship in our lives is a romantic one. Sometimes it is the person who saw us before the world did, and stayed long after the lights went out. For Dolly Parton, that person is Judy Ogle. Many people look at Dolly's life and wonder how she managed to go so far in an industry that often crushes women long before they grow old. But when you look at the people who stayed beside her all her life, Carl with his mountain-like silence, Judy with her breath-like understanding, you begin to see the truth. A woman cannot carry too many things on her back when she steps into a world that is glamorous but profoundly lonely. And among all the choices Dolly had to make, among the doors she had to open or close, one decision created endless rumors, endless questions, and endless misunderstandings. Dolly Parton never had children. It is not a subject Dolly likes to talk about, but in the rare moments she opens up, her voice always lowers, half speaking to the audience, half speaking to herself. People often assume Dolly chose her career, but the truth is softer and more painful, like everything most important in her life. During her busiest years, when she had just stepped out of Porter Wagoner's shadow, was building herself into an independent icon, touring non-stop, writing songs as if every night were the final deadline. That was also when she was diagnosed with a severe gynecological condition. She had to undergo surgery, treatment, long periods of stillness while the world applauded outside. Dolly said that during that time, she felt like she broke into pieces. Not because of the physical pain, but because of another kind. The pain of a woman facing the possibility that she might never have children. It's not that Dolly never dreamed. She once imagined children with Carl's eyes and her blonde hair. She pictured little outfits with sequins, tiny shoes sitting next to her high heels in the closet. But when her body spoke, Dolly understood that the bright lights of the stage always demand something in exchange. And what they took from her, in her case, was the one thing fame could never buy. People say Dolly chose her career over motherhood. But in the early mornings, the wee hours of wisdom, as she called them, when she wrote music in the kind of silence only dawn can offer, Dolly understood better than anyone that life doesn't always give us a choice. Sometimes it chooses for us, and all we can do is live with the consequences, with peace or with sorrow. The truth is, Dolly didn't give up being a mother. The chance was taken from her, and what remained was her way of turning that loss into something meaningful. Without children of her own, Dolly poured her love into other children, into charity, into books, into free educational programs that would later become a defining part of her humanitarian legacy. Dolly always said children are the most vulnerable. And if I can't bring one into the world, then I must protect the ones already here. In that sense, she became a mother in another way, broader, lasting, reaching beyond a family and into a community. But behind all the grand meanings, there were still moments no one saw. When Dolly watched small families backstage, watched colleagues holding their children, watched her sisters raise noisy, happy households. In those moments, her heart tightened just a little. Not regret, not self-pity, just the quiet ache of something that might have been, but wasn't. Carl never blamed Dolly. In fact, he gave her a kind of peace that only a man like Carl could offer. He didn't love her because she could give him children. He loved her because she was herself. And Judy, the one who witnessed Dolly in her most painful days, always stood behind her, always held her at the exact moments when Dolly could not pretend to be strong for anyone else. When Dolly retold her life in the musical, the part that brought the most tears was the moment she spoke about that incompleteness. A dream not as large as her career, but as large as the heart of a woman who always lived fully. The dream of holding her own child. And when Dolly said those words on stage, Judy sat in the audience, silent. Because perhaps only Judy knew how many times Dolly had cried in those years. Not for failed shows, not for the pressure of fame, but for a loneliness nothing could fill. For Dolly, not having children was not the simple choice of a woman too busy to be a mother. It was a soft, lingering scar she learned to carry for a lifetime, an invisible sacrifice, rarely spoken of, yet one of the most important hidden layers beneath her brilliant life. And from that place of absence, Dolly did something not every public figure can do. She turned her private pain into a collective comfort. She created free book programs for children, nurtured millions of young hearts she never had the chance to carry. She said that if God didn't give her one child, then she would become a mother to another world, the world of children with no one to defend them. Dolly Parton does not have children, but she gave birth to a legacy. And, in its own way, it is larger than anything a mother could ever hold in her arms. But perhaps what kept Dolly from ever being swallowed by that absence, by the unstable years, the rumors, the lights that were too hot, too bright, was the fact that she always kept for herself another life, a life the audience almost never sees. A simple life behind the spotlight where the glittering Dolly steps aside and becomes a woman who loves cooking, loves reading, loves tidying her kitchen, and lives in quiet peace. Many people assume Dolly Parton off stage looks exactly like she does on stage. Sparkling, exaggerated, dripping in rhinestones. But the real Dolly is different. She calls her stage persona her party dog look, something she puts on only for work. At home, Dolly says she can be as relaxed as any woman in the old Appalachian neighborhood. Stove turned on, a fat book in hand, and a pair of house slippers no one would ever imagine belonging to the legendary Dolly Parton. Her favorite thing to do on days with no tours, no filming, no guests, cooking. She says the kitchen is the one place that keeps her grounded after weeks of non-stop shows. Mastering the stage is one thing, but Dolly is happiest standing next to a pot of beans simmering on the stove, the smell of cornbread drifting through the kitchen. Things that take her back to her mother, her 11 siblings, the wooden cabin in Locust Ridge. And when she says she just wants to cook, read, and sometimes lie around, people realize that one of the most famous women in the world only wants the simplest things in life. Dolly doesn't watch much TV, doesn't chase news, doesn't follow Hollywood scandals. Every morning, she turns on the TV only to check if the world is still standing, then shuts it off and returns to her reading chair. Dolly loves cleaning, organizing her closets, finding scraps of paper with song lyrics tucked away, sometimes in the most unexpected places, like the underwear drawer. She once said, half joking, half serious, "I find songs all over the house, even in the drawer where I keep my panties." A funny line, but one that reveals exactly who Dolly is. Chaotic yet charming, accidental yet inspiring, always creating even while rummaging through a dresser. Dolly is also not the kind of person who enjoys being completely barefaced. She says that at home, she doesn't need wigs or glittering dresses, but she still likes a bit of makeup, her hair tied up with a scrunchie, in case someone comes by to fix the refrigerator. It's a kind of grace the audience never sees on stage, a respect for herself and for the people she loves. She once said that when Carl was still alive, she never let herself look worse coming home than she did going out on stage. He deserved to see me still looking nice, not the tired version after I've given my best appearance to the whole world. In those private moments, Dolly is no longer a diva, no longer an icon, no longer the woman America bows its head to whenever her name is spoken. She becomes someone so simple she is almost easy to overlook. Waking early, brewing coffee, opening the window, letting the old Appalachian sunlight step across the threshold and wake the pages that slept quietly through the night. Dolly Parton can stand before tens of thousands without trembling. Yet she can also find joy in a morning filled only with birdsong, the clatter of pots, and a list of small chores. It is a private space wide enough to hold the emptiness left by Carl Dean's passing, calm enough to steady her after years of stage smoke, soft enough for Dolly to find herself again. A woman who never forgot where she came from and what she is meant to give back to the world. And in those simplest days, Dolly says she sees most clearly what keeps her going. Not applause, not awards, not grand projects, but the belief that her life can still do something good for someone else. She calls that the only destination left at age 79. The quiet life behind the spotlight is not where Dolly hides. It is where she returns. And it is from that silence that she continues to create things that make the whole world pause and listen, in the way only Dolly Parton can. The simple life behind the spotlight is what kept Dolly standing tall throughout her entire career. Yet within that simplicity, a painful paradox becomes clearer than ever. The more ordinary her daily life is, the more fragile her emotions become. On stage, Dolly Parton is powerful, radiant, untouchable. But behind the curtain, she is a woman who is easy to cry, easy to hurt, easily softened by memories, and easily pulled back into losses she has always tried to hide. She says that the older she gets, the harder it is to hold back tears. Not out of weakness, but because her heart has stayed open for far too long, to love, to family, to friends, to the audience, and to the world. When someone has loved that much, they can no longer conceal the simplest human feeling. Longing. Longing for Carl. Longing for Judy during the times they part when Dolly goes on tour. Longing for a youth that passed too quickly, too brightly, too full of hope. Longing for the poor old days when everything was simpler. And sometimes, longing for herself. The Locust Ridge girl who once dreamed in front of a mirror and had no responsibility except to her own imagination. Dolly has loved too much in one lifetime, loved one man for life, loved one friend for life, loved the public for life. But few know that the price of becoming Dolly Parton is the quiet loneliness she only allowed herself to acknowledge when she neared 80. Only when the door closes, the wig comes off, and the glitter is washed away, does Dolly face the truest version of herself. A woman carrying memories, wounds, and hollow spaces that only time can touch. In those moments, Dolly is no longer a legend, no longer an immortal diva, but a woman learning how to keep living when the people she loved most have slowly left her side. Dolly Parton's personal life is not a story of scandal or collapse. It is a story of loyalty, loss, sacrifice, and a kind of beautiful emptiness that stings. The kind no one expects to find in the heart of a woman who always smiles, always shines, always seems unshakable. Yet it is these very contradictions, both strong and tender, both simple and extraordinary, that form the true soul of Dolly Parton. And perhaps it is because of this contrast that the world doesn't just love Dolly under the spotlight, but also loves the woman behind it, the one who spent her whole life bringing joy to others and saved all the sadness for herself. And then, at 79, when the spotlight was still there but the warmth of her loved ones had faded little by little, Dolly Parton had to face something she once believed she was strong enough to outrun, the greatest loss of her life. The day Carl Dean passed, the world didn't know. No media, no press releases, no public mourning, only Dolly and silence. A silence so deep, she said she could hear her own heart tighten. He had never belonged to the spotlight, so when he left the same way he lived. Quietly, neatly, without troubling anyone. But for Dolly, it was a blow she had never prepared for. Because you can stand alone on every stage, but not in your home. No more footsteps of Carl, no more silhouette on the back porch, no more afternoons of him reading the newspaper in the sunlight, no more voice asking, "You're home early?" Dolly said she never knew loneliness could make a sound. A very small, persistent sound, like wood expanding in the house at night, except it lived inside her chest. And at nearly 80, the woman America saw as an institution had to relearn how to live without the only life partner she ever had. Without Carl, even the simplest moments became luxuries. Eating together, sitting together in silence, waking up to find the other still breathing. Things that seemed small until they were gone, revealing they were the core of happiness all along. In the early months after Carl passed, Dolly barely spoke. She did the only thing she has always done whenever life pushed her to the bottom. She returned to music. But this time, music wasn't a place to create. It was a place to survive. Bringing Carl into the Broadway musical wasn't an artistic decision. It was a heart decision. Dolly said that every time the actor playing Carl stepped onto the stage and said, "Hello, I'm Carl Dean," the audience cheered, and she fought back tears. Not from pride, but from a pain laced with gratitude. She said, "Seeing him come alive every night, it makes me feel less alone." Only those who have lost half their soul understand that feeling. The feeling of meeting the love of your life again, in a strange way only art can offer. But Dolly doesn't live by memory alone. She fills the empty spaces with the simplest things. Cooking more, visiting family, spending time with Judy, reading more books, and doing little things Carl loved, like walking around the farm he once called his own slice of heaven. She says her greatest strength is not her voice, not her songwriting, but her ability to get back up. And at 79, Dolly rises again. Not to continue being a legend, but to continue living as a woman who has lost the greatest love of her life, yet still carries love for the world. The most beautiful thing is this: the more she hurts, the kinder Dolly becomes. The more she loses, the more generous she grows. The more she retreats into quiet, the more she pours herself into helping others. as if the emptiness inside her makes her want to fill the world with something warmer. At nearly 80, when most people seek rest, Dolly seeks purpose. She says, "At some point, life stops being about how you lived and becomes about what you leave behind for others to live with." And perhaps the journey of finding joy again after losing Carl Dean is also the journey of Dolly finding herself again, a version wiser, steadier, but still carrying the same soft heart she always had. Dolly at 79 is no longer the golden girl of Nashville, no longer the symbol of glitter, no longer the untouchable woman. She is a soul that has loved deeply, hurt deeply, lived deeply, and is now trying to turn her private pain into something that matters for someone else. Dolly Parton chooses kindness, and that is what makes her immortal in another sense. Not on stage, but in the hearts of those who understand that the most beautiful human light does not come from spotlights, but from how a person survives difficulty and sorrow. Recently, Dolly Parton's health has become a real concern for fans. She has missed 2 major events, the kind she never skipped in her entire career. At the ceremony honoring Dollywood, the theme park that has carried her name for 40 years, Dolly appeared only through a short video. She said she was having a few health issues and that doctors had ordered her to rest. Even though she smiled, it was clear she was tired. Her voice slower, her face thinner, her energy dimmer than usual. The very next day, the honorary Oscar for her lifelong humanitarian work was presented, without her. A rare legend honored for decades of charity, yet Dolly could only send her thanks from afar. Lily Tomlin, her longtime co-star, accepted the award on her behalf. The audience rose for a woman who wasn't there. It was an emptiness no one expected to feel at an event meant to celebrate Dolly Parton. Around the same time, Dolly's major Las Vegas shows were postponed. No illness was disclosed, only that she needed to stay near Vanderbilt Hospital for several rounds of treatment. Her sister Frida posted online asking people to pray for Dolly. That alone was enough for forums to explode with speculation about her condition. Amid the growing worry, Dolly posted a short video. "I ain't dead yet. Do I look sick to you? I'm working right now." She tried to lighten the mood, but fans could feel it. Dolly was downplaying the situation to keep people from worrying. She has never liked talking about her health, which only made this silence more alarming. What breaks fans' hearts isn't that Dolly is aging. Everyone expected that. But that a woman who has worked her entire life is now forced to stop at the doctor's request, to postpone shows, to decline once-in-a-lifetime ceremonies, to stay home, away from the stage, the very place Dolly has lived since she was a poor little girl in Tennessee. There is no melodrama, no heavy words, only a simple reality. Dolly's health is declining. She needs rest. And for the first time in her more than 60-year career, Dolly has had to accept the one thing she always avoided, that she no longer has the strength to stand and perform the way she once did. Audiences love her for that, for the silence, for the way she always pretends to be fine even when she clearly isn't. And because behind that familiar smile is a 79-year-old woman trying to maintain a normal rhythm of life while her body is signaling that it's time to slow down. Perhaps 2025 is a year of heavy loss and pain for Dolly Parton. We hope she stays strong through every difficulty, that she remains healthy enough to continue offering the good she has spent her entire life building. From music to kindness, to children's educational programs. No one expects Dolly to return in blazing glory. They only hope she stays well, stays safe, and gets to live the rest of her life however she wants. Without pressure, without demands, without having to force herself to be Dolly Parton the legend for even one more day if her body can't handle it. After everything she has been through, a lifetime of wounds, losses, the death of her husband, declining health, and months of stepping back to heal, what the world truly needs is simply to see Dolly continue to exist, whether on stage or in a short video with one of her familiar playful lines. For someone like Dolly, as long as she is still here, still smiling, still singing, still offering even the smallest bit of herself, that alone is enough for the audience to feel lucky. If you've made it to the very end of this story, leave a message for Dolly Parton. Even a simple wish, a small memory, or the reason you've loved her. Those words of encouragement might be exactly what a woman who has given her whole life to us needs in this moment. And if you want to stay with us through these emotional journeys about legends who have weathered so many storms, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. That's how you'll never miss a single story, and how these beautiful narratives can continue to be told, fully and with the dignity they deserve.